Guys, please do subscribe our channel and support us. The Republican Party just witnessed something that could change its future forever. And it all started with one shocking defeat. For years, Donald Trump's influence over the Republican Party looked unstoppable. Candidates either aligned themselves with him or disappeared politically. Critics inside the party were pushed aside, humiliated, or forced into silence. But now something different is happening, because even though Congressman Thomas Massie lost his primary battle, the reaction afterward may have created a much bigger political problem for Trump than Republicans expected. And honestly, the anger now building inside parts of the conservative movement feels very real. The reason is simple. A growing number of Republicans no longer believe this was just an ordinary election. They believe the system itself is being controlled by billionaire money, outside influence, and political loyalty tests that punish anyone willing to challenge the party leadership. That frustration exploded immediately after Massie's defeat. Now, Thomas Massie was never a typical Republican politician. Even people who strongly disagreed with him politically often admitted one thing about him. He voted based on principle far more often than political convenience. Sometimes that frustrated Democrats. Sometimes it frustrated Republicans. But it also earned him a reputation as someone difficult to control. And in modern politics, independent politicians often become dangerous to party leadership because party systems thrive on loyalty, not unpredictability. Massie regularly challenged military spending, foreign intervention, surveillance policies, and leadership decisions coming from both political parties. He also became one of the loudest Republican voices, demanding more transparency around high-profile scandals and government secrecy. That made him popular with certain voters, but increasingly unpopular with powerful political interests. Then came the primary battle that changed everything. Massie faced enormous financial opposition from groups determined to remove him from office. Millions of dollars poured into the race. Attack ads flooded the airwaves. And suddenly, a congressman who had spent years building a strong conservative reputation found himself fighting not just another candidate, but a political machine. When the results finally arrived, the defeat was close. Very close. And that detail matters, because close defeats create frustration differently than landslides do. A landslide feels final. A close loss feels personal. And many Massie supporters instantly began asking the same question. Who actually controls modern elections now? That frustration exploded online almost immediately. Conservative commentators started accusing wealthy donors and outside political groups of shaping Republican primaries more aggressively than voters themselves. Others argued the Republican Party was punishing independent thinkers inside its own movement. And suddenly the conversation became much larger than one congressional race. It became a debate about the future identity of the Republican Party itself. What makes this situation especially fascinating is who started criticizing Trump afterward. Not Democrats, Republicans. Even figures normally loyal to Trump publicly questioned some of the attacks directed at Massie during the campaign. That's important because internal criticism inside political movements is often far more dangerous than attacks from opponents. Why? Because it signals cracks forming inside the coalition itself. And right now, those cracks are becoming harder to ignore. One of the biggest issues fueling this divide involves foreign policy. For years, parts of the Republican base supported aggressive international alliances and military intervention. But a newer faction inside conservative politics increasingly rejects that approach. They want less foreign involvement, less military spending overseas, and more focus on domestic economic issues. Massie became one of the clearest voices representing that shift. He openly questioned foreign aid packages, military funding priorities, and America's role in international conflicts. That made him deeply controversial inside establishment political circles. But it also made him extremely popular among voters tired of endless global conflicts. Now, after his defeat, many supporters feel those anti-establishment voices are being systematically targeted and removed from power. Whether people agree with that claim or not, the perception itself is politically explosive. Because movements become unstable once supporters believe internal dissent is no longer allowed. And perhaps the most dangerous part for Trump is this. Massie's loss may actually increase his influence instead of ending it. That sounds strange at first, but politically, defeated figures sometimes become more powerful symbolically than they ever were in office, especially when supporters view them as martyrs. Now many conservative media personalities are already framing Massie exactly that way. Not as a failed politician, but as someone punished for refusing to fully submit to party leadership. That narrative could become extremely influential inside right-wing media ecosystems over the next several months, especially as tensions continue growing around issues like foreign policy, government transparency, and political corruption. Another reason this situation matters so much is because it exposes something deeper happening inside modern politics overall. Money. Huge money. Campaigns today are increasingly dominated by massive outside spending operations capable of flooding races with advertising, messaging, and media influence almost overnight. And voters across the political spectrum are growing uncomfortable with it. Republicans complain about billionaire donors. Democrats complain about corporate influence. Independents complain about both. Because ordinary voters increasingly feel like massive financial power now shapes political outcomes more aggressively than grassroots support alone. That frustration is dangerous for both parties, and Massie's defeat may become one of the clearest symbols of that growing anger. At the same time, Trump himself faces a difficult balancing act. On one hand, he still dominates the Republican Party culturally in ways few modern politicians ever have. His endorsements still matter enormously. His supporters remain fiercely loyal, and many Republican candidates continue fearing his political influence. But underneath that dominance, ideological fractures are widening, especially among younger conservative voters. Some want stronger nationalism, others want less foreign intervention. Some prioritize cultural issues, others focus almost entirely on economic frustration and government distrust. Holding those factions together becomes harder every year. And battles like this one intensify those tensions dramatically. Now, to be fair, Trump supporters would argue this primary simply proved elections still have consequences inside political parties. They'd say voters made a choice. They'd argue endorsements and fundraising are part of politics, not evidence of corruption. And politically, that argument absolutely resonates with millions of Republicans. But perception matters just as much as reality in politics. And right now, many conservatives perceive something important shifting. They see independent voices being removed. They see party loyalty becoming more important than ideological consistency. And they fear the Republican Party is becoming less tolerant of internal disagreement. That perception alone could fuel major future conflicts inside the movement, especially if economic instability, foreign policy controversies, or government scandals continue intensifying nationally. What makes the story even more unpredictable is what happens next for Massie himself. Because politicians who lose dramatic battles sometimes disappear quietly, but others reinvent themselves into larger national figures. And judging by the emotional reaction surrounding this race, many supporters clearly do not view him as politically finished. Far from it. Some already want him to become a larger voice challenging establishment politics from inside the conservative movement itself. That possibility should absolutely concern Republican leadership, because dissatisfied political movements rarely stay quiet forever. Eventually, they either reorganize or fracture. And throughout American history, internal party fractures have often reshaped entire political eras. For now, though, one thing is obvious. This wasn't just another primary election. It became a symbol of growing distrust, ideological division, and frustration with how modern politics actually operates behind the scenes. And whether people supported Thomas Massie or not, the reaction to his defeat revealed something much bigger happening across America right now. Voters are becoming increasingly suspicious of political systems controlled by money, influence, and loyalty instead of open debate. That frustration exists on the left, on the right, and everywhere in between. The only question now is how much larger that frustration becomes moving forward. Because when political movements start turning against themselves internally, history shows the consequences can become impossible to control.